everyone. Get ready for this episode where I talk to Jen and Carrie, who are the OT parent coaches. They are such a beautiful duo. I learned so much from them in this episode. I think you're going to absolutely love it. We talked about kids' behavior, kids' emotions, kids' sensory profiles, our own. If some of that is foreign to you, that's okay, because we dive into all of it over about half an hour. So I know you're going to enjoy it. So if you don't know, or if this is your first episode, welcome. If you don't know a bit about me, I'm Stephanie Pinto, obviously your host, and I'm a mum of two. I'm a best-selling author and an international speaker and award-winning coach, obviously in everything around emotional intelligence. I love all things emotionally intelligent parenting. I love understanding kids' emotions and behavior and our own, and how that drives us to, how we show up during the day with people around us. So I'm really glad you're here. I think this is going to be a really great one. I do want to acknowledge the Darug Nation, who are the traditional custodians of the land on which I live, work, and record this podcast. I pay my respects to all First Nations people, elders, and their ancestors. And I acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded and stand in solidarity towards a shared future. Okay, so if you have kids who are sometimes really challenging, sometimes maybe even aggressive or having meltdowns, or what we would call, big emotions, please, I just know you're going to take a lot away from this episode with Jen and Carrie. We talked about sensory profiles. We talked about understanding feelings and emotions and knowing how to kind of navigate those based on understanding what's going on with your kid's sensory system. So OTs are, oh my gosh, I'm pretty sure I've said a bajillion times before, I think I should have been an OT instead of a speech pathologist in my previous career. But anyway, it didn't work out that way. Now I have a lot of amazing OTs in my circles, and they're worth their weight in gold, honestly. So we're going to talk about really how to understand and normalize and respect kids and just other people's sensory preferences. We're talking about obviously the senses that our body has in terms of taking in information from the environment around us, but also from within our body. We talked about a chicken and the egg, kind of understanding triggers of kids' behavior. There's lots and lots. So I'm not going to go on anymore. Please enjoy this episode, and I will chat to you again right at the end. So the two amazing women behind the OT parent coaches are Carrie Carmen and Jen Papasadoro. Carrie has been a school-based occupational therapist for about 16 years, and during this time she's developed a passion for consulting with caregivers in order to more fully support their kids' development. She lives just outside of Boston, Massachusetts, with her husband, her two teenage sons, and their adopted dog. Jen has been an occupational therapist for over 30 years, and she's worked in adult neuro rehab for the first part of her career before moving into paediatric schools and ultimately then parent coaching. She is in just outside of Boston, Massachusetts as well, and has her husband. She's a mum to their young adult children. And as the co-founders of the OT Parent Coaches, Carrie and Jen apply their collective occupational therapy experience, their expertise, their enthusiasm to their coaching practice. And that focuses all on supporting parents as they gain knowledge and perspective and strategies to most effectively help their children. So I have Jen and Carrie here, the OT parent coaches. I'm so excited to chat with you both, and I have tons of questions to ask you. And I know I said before, as we were offline, anything that you guys share, I know is going to be valuable for the parents listening, because anything to do with parenting and raising these tiny human beings who are, like, let's face it, they're balls of emotion and experiences and, the behavior that comes with that. This stuff, I think it is a game changer when we understand a bit about our child's, obviously, emotions and behavior and what's beneath that, but in terms of sensory processing and sensory profiles and all this really good stuff. Anyway, so you can tell I'm excited, but I want to say hi and thank you so much for coming on.
Hi, we are so excited to be here and to meet you and to chat with you. And yeah, we feel so aligned with your work that we're really excited to make lots of connections with that and hopefully add some tidbits and nuggets that you find helpful as well.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you for having us.
Yes.
It's going to be good. I often think the stuff that I have learned from my OT friends, because for people who are listening and may not know much about my background, I was a speech pathologist for about 10 years before I moved into emotional intelligence. And a big chunk of that, I worked with neurodivergent kids. I worked at Autism Spectrum Australia. So obviously kids with autistic kids, ADHD kids, and just, differently wired kids. And so and again, I was saying offline, I felt like such a fraud. I felt like I had no idea how to get these kids to like connect and be regulated and pay attention. And I wish I learned about all the stuff that OTs know, because it would have been a game changer. And honestly, it actually has really, really helped with my parenting, because I have 2 kids. So I think it's going to be an amazing conversation. Let's just go with that. So for people who don't know about both of you and your business, the OT Parent Coaches, and your work, maybe let us know a bit about who you are, what you do, and your work and everything like that.
Sure.
Sure.
Go ahead, Anne.
Yeah, Carrie and I have known each other for about 15 plus years. We met when we both worked in the public schools. We worked together in that capacity. And the short of it is we basically both had the same passion in really supporting parents to support their kids. And we found that for those certain cases, certain kids we worked with, that when we had the most communication with adults, whether it be their teacher, their staff, other staff, their parent, that we were able to share our lens and our tricks of the trade tools for that particular kid, we saw that child was able to meet expectations so much easier because there was just so much carryover there. And that, the short of it is, that's what landed us into exploring doing some parent coaching and being able to support kids through supporting their parents.
Mm-hmm. And also realizing that parents need and are seeking support for themselves as well. So it's both things. It's helping them help their kids and helping them help themselves. And the combination is like, that's the magic, because it's the combination of the two of those components coming together that really, really make it work better and more successfully. And so, yeah. And so I was going to say, so I'm, you can, for the people listening to the voices, I'm Carrie. And I have 2 boys who are teenagers, 13 and 15, and a husband and a little dog, rescue dog. And go ahead.
Yeah, and I'm Jen, and I'm married too. And so with my husband, I have 2 young adult children. My son is 24 and my daughter is 21. So
oh wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
We've both been there. We've
been there.
Still there.
We're still going. Yeah, still learning.
We have our own, we coach each other all the time. We have stories all the time. We relate to your stories, everything. We're all parents who, not all, but those of us who are talking about it are all there together. So.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. So you guys are, I guess, further through the journey than me. And that always, I have to remind myself that is okay. Like my time, with teenagers will come and I will be equipped and it will be okay.
It will, and you'll be great. And it's all part of it. We're learning as we go. We're all evolving, and you can never, you can never know what's coming. And you just learn to have perspective, backward and forward perspective, and it really helps to kind of talk to people in all the stages of the journey. And that's what we're here for. And that's what we've been really passionate about doing with parents.
We love doing. Yep.
Yeah.
It's been wonderful to be able to bring that to the table.
Yep.
Yeah. So let's jump into, I know you guys are like wizards with what you call sensory processing, or the way that we take in information from our environment and the way that impacts how we behave, how we feel, how we show up, and things like that. And so first, maybe tell us a bit about what's the connection between emotional intelligence and, like, because we love each other's stuff and it makes so much sense. Emotional intelligence and then sensory profiles, or sensory, maybe even what is that? Do you know what I mean? So jump in.
Sure.
Maybe starting with
the definition.
Yeah, what we mean by sure. And then talk about the link to
the emotional
intelligence component. Sure. So in terms of, if people aren't aware of what we mean when we're saying a sensory profile, it's basically like the individualized manner in which one responds, like a person responds to sensory input, right? So it's everything from your affinities and aversions, your patterns, styles, needs, preferences, tendencies. People use all sorts of words, but basically it's all of those wrapped up together, and how it as to how you react, respond, interpret, and process information that's both external from your environment as well as internally from your own body. And sensory processing itself, some people will sort of try to describe it as, you know, like a traffic coordinator role, because it's incorporating
the messages,
all the messages that are coming in, right? And
so the input and the output, yeah, and how you respond. So that sometimes we were saying before we recorded, you know, about the terminology, and yes, that's how we tend to use sensory processing, is that process of the information coming in, getting processed, and then what output happens, which usually looks like a mood, behavior, you know, those kind of surface level things we see.
Or being able to integrate that and have the response internally that doesn't need to have a specific response. Like, in other words, when things are kind of running smoothly and the traffic coordinator is doing their job, you know, smoothly or effectively, if you will, then everything is kind of making sense and going in the right directions, to the right places, and not right, but we'll talk about that later.
But there's that just right flow.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's working congruently together and harmoniously, if you will. So that is what we are referring to when we talk about sensory processing, the process of managing all that information. And the profiles are how people, you know, how each individual has their specific tendencies within that process. So it's including all the 8 senses, and many people think there are only 5, as we learned in school a long time ago. But in addition to the classic 5 that a lot of people know about, there are 3 additional ones that have been studied a lot more recently, and then I'm sure there are more than that, even beyond the 8 that are there, but in our bodies, in our nervous systems. But the 3 additional ones rather are, for those who are unaware, proprioception, vestibular, and interoception. And just briefly, I mean, I want to define those as well.
Yeah, just like super briefly, proprioception is like your joint muscle sense. It gives you that sense of body awareness, kind of how much force to use with something, or how you're perceiving that in your joints. And so it gives you that position sense, really. The vestibular is like a kind of a balance sense. And so that kind of helps you with your center of gravity. You know, you're up, you know, you're down, you know, you're reaching down, you know, you're standing up, you know, you're sitting. And then interoception is being aware of those internal sensations. So being aware of that your bladder is full, or being aware that you're sweating, or your heart rate's pounding. So more of those,
or that you're hungry, or any of the things.
Yeah, just that you're hungry. So those from your internal noticings with your from your organs. Yeah.
So that's defining
that's sensory profile,
and how it relates.
And then, it totally relates, because to your work and to the work of or to thinking about emotional intelligence, because that sensory awareness is really foundational to things like self-regulation and making sense of all your emotions and your feelings. And you know, it's really essential. And when you think about it, once you're aware of your own sensory profile, what you need, what works for you, what doesn't, under what conditions, you're building skills of self-awareness, have self-confidence, and then you're able to self-advocate. And parents are able to support their child too, once they have an appreciation of that. So it really is totally aligned to all of those pieces of emotional intelligence.
And I will add to this by saying we you know, it's a pyramid and of skills and abilities, and the higher order thinking is up at, you know, the top, and then things such as at the very foundational level, such as sensory I'll say processing, all of these different categories, the eight sensory systems, or the 8 senses. Those are it's like the base level. I know you already said that. It's the bottom of the pyramid, because everything else is layered on that. If those things aren't I'll say in check, but like if they're not being if they're not working smoothly, or if they're not being processed in a way that is
accommodated, supported.
Then anything else on top of that, is going to have the little fracture in the system, and it could impact also too, that things like language and emotions and feelings, those are kind of arbitrary without the feeling, because you don't have, those are like, we have constructs, like, these constructs of emotions and feelings that we as a society, we explain what those are and what they look like and what they feel like, but really it comes from those physiological feelings inside that you notice, and everyone experiences them differently. And so we're attaching those, we're saying to, teaching children when we're using language, and that what that might be, what feeling or emotion they might be having, but really we're attaching it to something that they're feeling physiologically or physically. So to explain that to them, and to have that awareness as an adult, to explain it to a kid, to start to understand like what we notice and what we observe, is really important for them to start to figure out, because some kids don't know what you're talking about when you say, you sad or frustrated or mad. So talking about what their actions, or you're seeing visibly, or your eyes look wet instead of sad or something. So it's really important to use that language and to use that as the foundation to start talking about the more complex parts that language has to do with.
Right. So even just noticing something like for interoception, even just noticing like, oh, I can see water beating up on your face. And I wonder what that means. I wonder, if they don't have the language, or not sure, I wonder if that means you're too hot, or maybe, you're thirsty. Do you need to take your coat off? Or, so even bringing that level of awareness is a building block for the emotion pieces and emotion language.
Wow. You know what? Just as you were describing that last little bit, Jen, I was thinking of a beautiful little girl that so part of my work is emotionally intelligent parent coaching. The other part is that I work with kids and teens around anxiety. And I have a beautiful little girl at the moment who is making these amazing strides in her overcoming her anxiety, which is amazing. And we had to have a conversation a couple of weeks ago about, because one of her fears was, I'm going to say was, because we're still in the program, it's only 10 weeks, and yet we're running out of goals and things to work on. And so we had to have a conversation, because I said she was sensing, like was able to notice the sensation of the upset or something was happening in her tummy, but she would go directly to, I'm going to vomit. So that was her fear. And she would say to her mum, am I going to vomit? Like, she would ask her mum multiple times before school started in the morning. Obviously, there was some school hesitation / refusal and stuff like that. And so we had to have a conversation, and I drew stuff and wrote stuff down. And I was like, we're deviating, because we need to learn a bit about interoception. Like, God, I know OT, And so
it's great. That's what it is.
Yeah, I wish I could show you. I actually asked the mum, and she said yes. I said, can you send me these? She printed off these like Canva designed little posters for her daughter that said, if I have an upset tummy in my feeling in my tummy, it could be. And then she had like 9 little colored circles, and one said, she was about 7 or 8. I think she's 7 or 8. And it said, I might need to go to the toilet. I know you guys call it bathroom, but we just say toilet. Like, I might need to.
No, we get it.
I might be a bit nervous. I might need to have a drink. I might be hungry.
Possibilities.
All these possibilities. And this girl had before having that awareness of the possibilities that she could fathom, it was just, I have this feeling, I'm gonna vomit. Like, no wonder if you don't know what you don't know. And when our kids don't realize those sensations and what they could mean, oh my God, it was
it's not just that's very exciting. And it's not just one thing that, like, I love that it's an option, like list of things that could be, and it could be also one more, which is a question mark, something different for that person.
Exactly.
Because, and we're really big fans of the work of Kelly Mahler, who's doing a lot. She's an OT. I don't know if you're familiar. Yeah. So she's been doing a lot of, shout out Kelly Mahler, but she's been doing a lot with bringing interoception and interoceptive awareness to the table here. And that reminds me of her curriculum, where it has I've been using that with someone as well at school, where it has options and visuals for the possibilities that it can be. And like you said, when someone has a certain pattern of when a noticing an observation of within their body, they can actually literally have that as like a little cheat sheet of what this might be, because they kind of forget in that moment. And it's as a teaching tool as well. It's a really good strategy to tune into that. I mean, can you imagine if we all knew that when we were younger, like what the different things might be when you feel them, instead of like the anxiety it provokes?
Even like the first time,
the shame
like you
that you
got a
might
headache or something like that.
It's confusing. It's confusing.
It is confusing.
And I think
some people need it laid out much more explicitly like that. Some people it's more intuitive.
And you know what, for people listening, if you are, I mean, I'm assuming you're a parent or educator or someone who lives or works with kids, so you're an adult, right? I want you to think about the fact that most likely you were not taught this stuff, and most likely, in fact, if we go further, you were probably taught, I mean, I was, to squash that and ignore it and suppress it. And, you know, you don't need to go to the bathroom. You should have gone at recess.
Never mind. You're fine.
Or,
you're fine.
You know, it's not spicy. Eat it. It's cold. Wear it. Like, what do you guys think? Or maybe that's like a silly question, but when we prescribe how we think our child should feel, or we assume,
don't get me started.
I know we could talk for days.
Don't get me started.
But we see this all the time, even working in the schools. You know, we'd be out at recess and adults, very well-meaning adults, you know, would say, you know, put your coat on, it's cold, or, you know, and the kids sweating bullets and you know, so not imposing your own sensory profile onto others, because kids, we heard it from kids all the time. They made me put my coat on, but I'm sweating. I've been running around.
And then meanwhile, the teacher will have their coat on in the classroom because the, you know,
the heat's not working.
They chose to do. So we need to empower, we want to really validate kids' feelings of these sensory differences, and well, not differences, but their sensory profiles themselves, because to learn from an early age that those are valid and to honor those, and there's no right or wrong or good or bad, and yours might be different from mine, how important that is to learn and to grow and develop
for yourself.
And it's not just accommodating them because it feels nicer. It's also because it's building the skills of self-awareness, self-advocacy. We want them to grow up to be an adult who can articulate. Actually, for me, that really is bothering me, or for me, I run, you know, you hear adults tell you their preferences, but it's like sometimes there's shame attached, or sometimes they have to explain themselves, or they feel like they're different from everyone else in a way that isn't good. Or so to be able to like promote that for children's development, it's so healthy. It makes them stronger and more.
It's very empowering.
It makes them have it helps them develop the skills that we ultimately, I think, all want kids to have when they're adults. And I think that's really, really important to be aware of.
To be able to
put at the forefront.
We always are fans of helping kids. You know, the ultimate thing the thing we want our kids to do is be good self-advocates, and before you're a self-advocate, you have to know yourself and know what you need, and that's all about your preferences and all those little things that make you tick. So whether you're not gonna, you know, if you're over someone's house and they have a certain food and you don't like that food, you know, not that you have to eat it because you don't want to be rude, you know, and that's how, you know, some of us were brought up, and that kids are still being told that, but it's not validating their own individual sensory profile. And I think, I mean, that's how it's so linked to like emotional intelligence, because it's the building blocks for these other skills. And I feel like it can be very confusing to kids when we invalidate some aspects, but then we're trying to help them develop these other skills and help them develop their language related to their feelings and emotions. But yet we're literally saying like, oh, never mind, you're fine. Or how can you possibly do blah, 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 or how can you tolerate this or not tolerate this? It's like, I mean, we can say that, but as long as it's with a true curiosity of how can you, as opposed to how can you, it's the tone. It's the tone that's important. Because actually, I literally just said this to my son earlier, my teenage son. I was like, oh my gosh, like, because I was having trouble with he was playing a little ditty on piano while he was also listening to a podcast. And I was like, and in the background, I could hear both. And I was trying to focus on what I was doing. I was like, how can you possibly have both of those things and be processing it? And he literally said to me, I think this is one of those things where it's like, we have different sensory profiles because he hears me talk about it. And I said, you're right. Actually, you're right. And so I tried to backtrack I just wanted to make sure that I said, you're right. It was more an observation than like a objection and a questioning, it was more just a curiosity. I'm so interested that he can do that. And my brain
it can't.
Yeah.
So,
and by the way, Stephanie, we love that you validated your daughter's sensory system
with the stinky dog,
with the smelly dog in the car incident that you had on one of your podcasts that we happened to listen to. We were like, yay, she validated it. And I mean, there were so many great things about what you did with the collaborative problem solving and solutions, and that who would have guessed that it was the smelly dog, and
as one of the things, and we loved that story.
One of the things, and we love it how you just like, oh yeah, the dog does, I could see that, even though it didn't bother you. Even though it didn't bother you.
I'm glad I forgot about that. Yeah, that's on a previous episode somewhere. I remember, I don't know if I mentioned it on that episode, but she also, maybe I did, we went to the fish markets like a few years ago, and I also then noticed, and I'm going to have a question attached to this. I then noticed that I was not brought up eating fish. In fact, I just had a conversation with someone the other day saying the reason is because my mum fed us disgusting fish fingers that were soggy and gross. So now me, my brother and sister hate anything fishy seafood. Like, yes, it's a shame. I'm sorry, but we don't. Although I've learned to tolerate tuna and sushi, and I like that. Anyway, so I knew that I didn't like it, and I was like just grinning and bearing it, and with our family. But my daughter, she was like almost refusing to go into the fish markets. It's near the Sydney Harbour, like it's beautiful. But she was on the verge of, I know, a meltdown if I had pushed her, if I had said, everyone else is just dealing with it. I'm sure it's not that big a deal. Like, I don't like it either, so suck it up. And I was like, obviously me being what I do, we went to the car. I found her must have been around the time of the pandemic. I found her little mask again and put some essential oil, on it. And so that helped her. I guess it's honoring her sensory preferences, in that sense of smell for her is really strong. And yet, even though I could squash that, I just talked about, I think somewhere on my stories, maybe front loading, that if we help and do that problem solving and collaborative, then we're saving time in the long run.
Yes,
we maybe the meltdown. We're saving, everyone has a crap day because she's screaming and we have to go home and like it was ruined. Like, we're saving all of that.
We've had experiences where it's proof is in the pudding. It works. It happens. We're saving time on it, and it feels better too.
Right. So maybe, you've said this, if you're going to use the time to figure it out with your child. Yeah.
So maybe my question,
sorry.
I want to make it like practical for the parents listening, or teachers or educators, whoever you are. What are some things then that as the adults we need to maybe keep in mind or be aware of? Or maybe even what are some things we can do when we notice a child is, because you said it will show up in their behavior. They'll be a little bit maybe irritable, uncooperative, resistive, all those quote unquote challenging behaviors. If we're noticing those, where do we kind of go to with like, sensory, I know a bit about sensory profiles. What can I do? Does that make sense?
Sure. Well, also I was going to have a related comment before directly answering it about the practical applications, because it's interesting about it being a sensory input, being like a particular trigger for someone to become dysregulated. And also it's kind of a chicken and the egg kind of situation where it's like that can happen. And also it can be that once you're already dysregulated, say it was something else that set them off, whether it's they didn't get what they expected or wanted or needed, or they what other reasons? I mean, they could be tired, or there could be something that upset them from anything that happened with a relationship, anything. And then a person's already dysregulated. This is kids and adults alike. And then their body has now released all the stress and, hormones, all the things that physiologically there now changes inside, heart racing faster, different things. And as a result, that can also then sort of either trigger the difficulty with handling a sensory input, or kind of like your body is more heightened. It's in a stress response at that point. We're just regulated, right? So if you're in a stress mode, and you're going to be more attuned to any other threats that come along. So even if it's something that you could tolerate on another day with other circumstances, that smell, for example, might be like the last thing that you notice it. And it's like it's the thing that pushes you out.
It's like totally.
And that might be the only thing you're focused on. So it might be the smell, and a parent or an adult thinks that the response is about only the smell, but it's the one thing that they can sort of identify or hone in on
At that moment.
or articulate or, so at that moment. So that was
Right.
a really important thing I wanted to point out, because these come up all the time and it's not really one or the other. It can be either or.
Yeah. And that kind of goes back to, I think, what we were saying before about how, it can be tricky sometimes for adults or parents to discern, because they'll say like, oh, well, they could do it yesterday. Like Carrie said, that like, oh, they could do it yesterday, but maybe they had slept better, or maybe, they had a better bus ride to school, or
stars
maybe
were aligned
the
in
stars
some
were
ways.
aligned. Yeah, the stars were aligned on that day. And so which makes it tricky for parents to look at those patterns. But we do tell them that you can look for patterns in general. There is also, like, we're able to use a tool that Winnie Dunn, OT extraordinaire, came up with. Dr. Winnie Dunn came up with the sensory profile assessment, which helps categorize that a lot easier. And so she's come up with 4 different profiles in general, but also it looks at overall the different sensory systems and how, and it looks at those tendencies in all the different areas. So how does one respond to kind of more kind of vestibular input, or a smell, or a touch, or tactile input. And so it does give you clues into kind of figuring out what may be going on there.
And I think practically speaking, even if you don't have that tool, or you're not aware of it, or you don't have access, thinking about, as you're asking about what can someone do, you can think about the categories, even list them out, think about your own, go through your own tendencies and preferences. Like you can write out auditory, visual, all these things, and you can write them out, and you can look up, there's plenty of information, online in terms of just listing and defining the categories, the sensory systems, and you can talk about or identify your own, what makes you tick, what you like and don't like. And then it's important to both things you like and don't like, because I think that's the other thing. Some people think, oh, I'm so sensory, or people say funny things about things that bother them, but it's also things you like and seek out, things that regulate you. It's your things that you go to help you get ready in the morning, to feel ready for your day, the things that you do to stay regulated, the things you do to calm down at the end of the day. So you can do that for yourself. Then you can try to go through for each of your family members and notice like similarities and differences and identify those, and then validate. That's the biggest thing.
That's the biggest thing.
And then accommodate for that. So it might be like, to your point about when people are going to something together, and I mean, there's a whole other conversation to be had about conflicting ones, like when one person likes something and one doesn't, or one's bothered and one isn't. But I think in terms of the strategies, is identifying that, having an awareness of it, number 1, number 2, validating it. Number 3, not pushing it too far, because then, like you said, you're squashing it down. You're teaching them to ignore the feelings they're having in their body, which I don't think many people would. Well, let's just say we're not fans of that.
Right.
It doesn't teach kids much positive, healthy, self-awareness skills.
Yeah.
And I think so. Validating it, trying to accommodate, ask if the problem solving. It's also, a lot of it is being like observing it, use declarative language. Saying, I noticed that this, or it seems pretty hard. That I noticed you're covering your ears, things like that then start the conversation, because a child will feel seen and heard and feel like they have a safe outlet for talking about what's bothering them. And if they're not sure what's bothering them, it's a conversation to open up. Like, I noticed it's really, you might sort of make your own statement about yourself that is either completely, is like totally genuine because it's bothering you too, or you noticed it too, or you're excited by it too, or that you're sort of saying it to relate to the kid. Like, I noticed some people here are, loving the music, or whatever the thing is. So it opens that up to being able to have the conversation and allow the kid the kid or the adult an out from that situation, if it's really starting to cause distress. So catching it early.
Yeah. And you can even highlight, just again, for self-advocacy or self-awareness, even highlighting the things that aren't necessarily problematic, but they're helpful tools. Like, I always tell, when I'm working with, parents of kids, I always say, I remember in college noticing, wow, every time I study for an exam that's really stressful, I always need licorice and popcorn. I'm always eating because I need it. And I'm a gum chewer. Before this podcast, I was chewing gum, like getting my, energy out that way. So like, I really need that like oral, like heavy work in my mouth to help regulate me and help me focus. And so even pointing out those kinds of things, like, oh, I notice, every time, like you really like to like dive in the cushions and like get all snuggly or get really tucked in at night, and that helps you kind of power your energy down to get ready to sleep. So yeah, noticing everything, because there's no wrong sensory profile. There's no good sensory profile. There's no bad sensory profile. Just they're all very unique. And so the more you can concretely and explicitly help kids realize what is helpful to them in various situations, you're really empowering them with tools for self-advocacy, self-awareness.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
There's so much there.
We
Like,
could talk for days, but yeah.
Yeah, we could talk. You'll have to come back on another time.
we'll do a part 2 if you have us.
Yes, we would love to.
We'll do a part 2. So I think to wrap it up, I love that we've obviously talked about sensory profiles and the differences, just the natural differences that we all have, and some tips around for parents or educators for noticing patterns, not only in your child or the student, let's say, but in yourself as the parent, honoring those. I love how you said listing them out, like categorize them in the different senses. And noticing them non-judgmentally in your kids. I think that's massive, because then we're modeling that awareness. And then what can we do about it? When there's a storm, I need this. When we are getting in the car, I need that. And this will make the mornings more smooth, or this will make you feel better at nighttime. Or like, I just can see so many. Actually, it's something that I can't remember, you were saying something, Carrie, and anyway, I had a memory jump in. My husband, when he when he does like the dishes and the dishwasher and wiping down the benches, oh my goodness, if he is listening to this particular podcast or this particular music, he likes this crazy Mongolian like drumming. It's wild. My kids actually love it. It's like Mongolian throat singing. I don't know what it is. Okay. If he has those things on, oh my God, get out of the way, because look how efficient and look how he works. It's wild. And then without that stuff, it's like, for any of us, it's like, boring, got to do this, got to do that. So even that, I think, honoring as adults what works for us and what doesn't, and
exactly.
like the little tips and hacks. I think that's really, really powerful.
I also think, I love that. And I think that also one of the most important takeaways is just even like realizing that that's what that is. Like, it's not just, I like to listen to music and do house chores. It's like, it's actually like, that's a really big, it's to be acknowledged as this is part of my sensory profile, what works for me, what makes me efficient or tired, or what, all the things. But I think it's really important to even just take that away, that like, it's not just a throwaway comment that you have a preference for something, or you like this or that, or this doesn't, you hate when this pet peeve, you have this pet peeve. Those are really important. It's the foundation, as we said, the foundation for a lot of other things. And the more you know that, and the more you acknowledge that, and the more you talk about it with everyone and normalize your own profiles, it really sheds
so much perspective.
It really helps everyone involved. So I think it's important that you said that, because it's not just a little thing, it's something to be named and talked about and discussed. So I'm glad you brought that forward.
Okay, so we kind of we did talk about behavior and how this kind of shows up and influences behavior for our kids, but you do have I guess a freebie for the parents and the people who are listening, which is around finding out the 3 key things that help you get back on track when maybe you have lots of meltdowns and they're derailing your day. So I want to say a huge thank you for you guys offering that to everyone listening. I'm going to put the link. I'm going to put the link in like the show notes. You guys will be able to get it from
we hope it'll be helpful for people. I think it's great. You got to know these 3 key things. So once you do, you're equipped. They're OT approved, and
they are OT
helpful things to know and to consider so that things don't derail your day. Like
because we've all been there. We've all been there with the you're eating dinner, you're about to get in the car, or maybe you're in the middle of a bedtime routine and your child has a full-blown meltdown. And that throws everything off, and it throws everything around them, like everyone around them, off. So I think that's amazing. I want to say thank you I want everyone to jump on and find the link to that in the show notes, and you can go download it, and then everything is going to make a little bit more sense, and you're going to be a little bit further on thinking, now I know why that's happening and what I can do. So that's awesome.
Yes, thank you for sharing that.
So much.
We hope it helps.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, guys, for your day. It's been like absolutely eye-opening and heartwarming at the same time. And I just love everything you share. So on behalf of everyone
Thank you,
listening.
Steph.
Thank you so
We're
much.
so aligned. It's been a pleasure. We're
Yes.
so happy to have had this conversation with you.
Yeah,
And
lots of fun.
we have lots more to still talk about, it sounds like.
Yeah, definitely another time for sure.
We appreciate it.
Just saying, I think that was a pretty awesome episode. As we said on the interview, I think we could have talked for hours upon hours, but I know that you guys will have taken something, like at least a couple of ideas away from that interview. I know the conversation was rich with so many different aspects. We talked about so many different things about kids' emotions and behavior and their sensory profiles. Please jump on to the link in the show notes from Jen and Carrie's guide that is going to help you understand some of those big emotions and challenging behaviors from a sensory perspective. So I think that is gold. Please go on straight away after this. And the last thing I want to say is please, 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 I would love if you can take just maybe 30 seconds to give this podcast a rating or a review wherever you listen to it. That honestly, you cannot imagine how much that helps me and how much it means to me, because the whole algorithm on the podcast platforms is going to notice that people are enjoying what we are talking about, and it's going to push it out to hopefully more parents and educators that would want to, that can really benefit from listening to the Emotionally Intelligent Parenting podcast. So I want to say thank you in advance. Have a beautiful rest of your day, and I will see you on the next one.